Thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here again with a bunch of red-blooded American patriots like you. Thanks for coming out and sitting on the House lawn today. I love it when good Americans show up and express their concern for an issue as important as the Second Amendment in fashions like this. It's very important. You know, I was raised in a military home, and from my early years, I can remember my father. We traveled the world as a military brat. I did, but my father would occasionally, we'd go back home to Lexington, Kentucky, and he'd pull out from underneath his mom and dad's bed in one of their guest rooms the guns he had. And so from an early age, I was raised being trained not to point the muzzle, even if it was unloaded in somebody's face, etc. And, you know, early on, it was just kind of a novelty. We'd go out to the gun range occasionally. We'd shoot a couple balloons. We'd shoot a couple targets. But as I grew older and as I learned more about our country and the vision our founders had and how important it was that they maintain the balance of power between the federal and the state and the local governments, between the judicial and the legislative and the executive branches, but perhaps most importantly, the contract that they felt had been violated by the British government with the colonies and the contract they set up called the United States Constitution that governed the way the government would interact with the American people. I learned more importantly how important the Second Amendment was to maintaining that balance of power. Wouldn't you agree? Like so many of our amendments, we have allowed them to slowly slip away, those rights, either because we've abused that power, or in this case, because we've let politicians abuse their power and turn what used to be a fundamental right into something that now has become a privilege, where we feel like we have to jump through hoops to satisfy some government arrangement in order to carry a gun. And I was real excited as I walked up here to see all these folks strapping on weapons in the open. It just seems like sometimes the right thing to do. Thank you, folks, for doing that. It shows their independence and their willingness. You're not breaking the law, are you? Well, here in the Ohio legislature, I've had a good time standing up for a lot of issues on behalf of the people of the 36th House District, and I do intend to continue to do that, even if it costs me a political position, because it's the right thing to do, as Senator John Husted just said. And a couple of things that I've been happy to be a part of, one of them is to co-sponsor a bill that many of you I know would very much appreciate in the Ohio House. It's the Alaskan-style carry permit bill, which would, which I think would make it where I didn't have to carry this. Yeah. And folks, there is always something to be done. Whether the Republicans are in charge, as Senator Husted just talked about his experience with Governor Taft, or the Democrats are in charge today in the Ohio House, that bill is stalled in that building. A conversation that really causes the Second Amendment to become as important and vice versa as the 10th Amendment, which is really what we're talking about. It's well worth our time, and it's something that we all ought to be engaged in fighting for. And I ask you to not just march on the State House lawn, as proud as I am for you to do that, but go home, contact your senator, contact your representative, and let's move these bills through that House. You know, folks, today I'm here as a state representative from the Dayton area, and I'm very grateful to play a role in many of the issues that are impacting Ohioans across the state of Ohio, including the right to bear arms, which is an individual right, as we all agree and know. But really, I'm also traveling the state as a candidate for auditor of state, and all over this state, I see just growing by leaps and bounds this organization that I see many of the flags around here that I assume are from that organization and the Tea Party movement. And let me tell you, thank you. Let me tell you that this movement, while every movement has its fringe element, I think my church has its fringe element. This movement is by and large, the vast majority of it, groups just like you, fed up Americans with their Constitution being trampled on by people who think they know better. And whether it's the First Amendment or the Second Amendment or the 10th Amendment, these are amendments that our founders were willing to put their lives on the line for and they're amendments that we should be willing to put our lives on the line for. And I join you in that fight, and I encourage you in that fight, and I beg you to continue. I promise you the politicians are listening. It may not feel like they're listening, but let me tell you, politicians who fail to be principled in victory also fail to be principled in defeat. And let me explain for you what that means. While each of us desire very much to have politicians who govern the way they campaign, unfortunately, there are too few who do it or not many who do it that way. But when you rise up and lift up your voices and tell those politicians that they will lose their position of power if they don't listen to you, the people, they start to take notice. I've sat in the closed-door meetings where organizations such as yours are discussed, not necessarily because we on the right disagree, but because some of those, even on the right, value their power more than they value principle. Here's what I ask you to do. Turn up the volume. You've got it high right now, folks. If we take this House back and we make it pro-gun, and we march on Washington and we make that pro-gun, and we have politicians who start to stand up for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, folks, if we become lackadaisical again, we will only watch that slowly subside again. We have the volume turned up. Here's my beg to you. Turn it up louder. Keep it up high. I don't care who's in power. It's ours to keep these politicians accountable. You're doing a great job. Continue it. I'm proud to be a part of the movement with each of you. Most of all, I'm proud of the movement itself. And it's bigger than any one individual. It's even bigger than one party. I'm frankly proud, and there's probably not a ton we agree on, that Attorney General Rich Cordray is here with us today to stand up here on this stage with each of you as a Democrat supporting the Second Amendment, and he should be applauded for it. This is about principle, folks. This is about preserving the liberty that our founders gave, and I will just say one more thing and then I'll get off the stage. And that is, we like to look back on 1776. We like to look back on those early formative years. And as America starts to pay a little bit more attention to the Constitution of the United States, and bless God they're doing it, we like to look back on those years as kind of the glory years and think about the fantastic job that our founders did. And I think many of us maybe have a Pollyannish view of what that must have been like, don't you think? Folks, these folks risked their lives, their liberty. They gave up of their personal fortunes. These were men of influence and women of influence. They had a whole lot to lose, and from what they could tell, probably not a whole lot to gain. You think in 1776, when they signed that Declaration of Independence, basically signing themselves a death sentence with the British government, that they had any clue that 200 years later, 220 years later, it would be the best and brightest light shining on a hill of freedom across the world? You think they had any clue? I guarantee you they had no clue. But they had a vision. They were willing to risk their families. It wasn't just them. It was their families. It was their wealth. It was their own pride and dignity and their way of being. Folks, that's what we're being called to again as Americans today. It's not just showing up at a rally, and I'm not making fun of this. This is what's urging and spurring and exciting the debate, and you're to be applauded for it. But it's when we go home, and it's how we make our own personal finance decisions, and it's the sacrifices we personally make as families and as individuals that will preserve this liberty and freedom for the next generation. Our country's under attack, folks. It's under attack by liberal, crazy, leftist extremists from the Middle East, but it's also under attack from individuals who have been born, maybe in this country and maybe not, who do not understand and do not appreciate the liberty that I understood coming through a very Christian upbringing, where I understood the liberty that was given to us and the very delicate balance that was found inside the Constitution of the United States. And folks, it's this generation's job to stand up for liberty again. The fight is here, it's domestic, and it's time we all band together. It's time we stand up. It's time we offer up our own personal lives and fortunes to preserve this liberty. I believe you folks are doing it. I believe you're seeing leaders across this state and across this nation standing up to do it. Whether I'm in front of you, behind you, beside you, or even under the bus, I'm proud to be with you. Godspeed. Let's take this country and state back, and thank you for your service.